Hi, everybody. I'm late today. Sorry. Had a little bit of a reconnection issue, but we're here. And we're going to tie a Goddard Caddis today, which is, it gives a lot of people fits. It's a quite a popular fly for fishing, just kind of blind fishing. It's a good floater. It's made all entirely of deer hair and hackle. So it floats really well. It imitates a caddis fly, which I had a picture of that's not there anymore, so I won't show it to you. But I see some people are coming in. John from New Hampshire, Zyvan, William, Roger Bird from Chile, Texas, and Ed from Florida. Oh, they're popping right in. Dave Rossett. Dave Rossett, we haven't seen you here in a long time, Dave. Glad to have you back. So anyway, we're going to tie Goddard Caddis, and it doesn't use many materials, but it does have some tricky things. But I know that a lot of you have trouble with deer hair, and we did a live session on deer hair last week. So I thought we would continue that and work with a little more deer hair this week. And this time we'll spin some and trim it in a little more detail so that you can see how that works. Now, the Goddard Caddis was developed by the late John Goddard in the UK for fishing what they call over there sedges, mainly in still water, but also in moving water. And it was designed to float really well because it's all deer hair, and it's also a very good skating fly. It's a fly that really, if you like to skate caddis flies, that is something that sometimes will drive the fish crazy and often doesn't work, but it's worth a try sometimes. And to skate a caddis fly, I like to grease my whole leader, and you want to cast across and a little bit down, usually in smoother water, whether it's fast or slow, but you don't want too much of a bumpy surface. And then you raise the tip of your rod and draw the fly across the surface of the water, keeping as much leader and all of your fly line off the water as you can, because if the fly line and the leader are down in the water, they're going to yank that caddis under. And what you want it to do is kind of skate across the top of the water. And then you just kind of drop your rod and let the caddis dead drift. Then you pick it up and skate it a little bit more, drop your rod, let it dead drift. And at times that will really drive the fish crazy. I found it to work for some strange reason better in the morning than it does at any other time of day. So the Goddard Caddis is great for that. I'm not so sure how great of a caddis imitation it is. It has a shape of a caddis, but caddis are kind of delicate, and this thing is kind of big and bulky. So it may work for a caddis, but it works really well for terrestrial imitation because it does land with a little bit of a plop. So who knows what the fish take it for? I remember fishing the River Test in the UK once. And there was an old gentleman named Jim Hadrill, who was a retired British military officer. He was a river keeper there on the Test, and he put me in a pool at the very head of the property I was fishing. And he said, "Put on a Goddard Caddis." And I said, "Goddard Caddis?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I didn't see any caddis flies at all. I saw a few mayflies on the water and some midges, but no caddis flies." He said, "No, try a Goddard Caddis." I put on a Goddard Caddis, and I made a few casts, and nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, and Jim had disappeared. He had gone around the corner. And all of a sudden, the fish absolutely went crazy. They started boiling all over the surface. And I couldn't figure it out. And I threw that Goddard Caddis out, and the fish just attacked it. It caught a couple of nice fish, and I wondered where Jim was. And I moved up a little bit and went around the corner, and there was Jim throwing handfuls of fish pellets in the water, chumming for me, which I didn't really appreciate. And I asked Jim to stop chumming. I took off the Goddard Caddis and went somewhere else where there were no fish pellets. So the Goddard Caddis is a pretty darn good fish pellet imitation if you fish for hatchery fish. I would clip the hackle and the antennae off and just use the deer hair body. In fact, if you want to make a pellet fly, you can just tie it the way we tie it here and leave the hackle and the antennae off. But anyway, whatever it imitates, it does work, and it does work quite well. So, any questions before we start? We're using deer hair, deer body hair, kind of the standard deer body hair that you would buy as natural deer body hair. You could use the finer Comparadun hair, but I like a little bit bigger diameter hairs for the Goddard Caddis. So just a standard piece of deer body hair, and I'll show you the piece I'm using, will work the best, I think. And then a brown hackle, and that's all you need. And a single-edged razor blade or a double-edged razor blade broken in half. If you don't have a double-edged razor blade, you can also trim this with a pair of longer, sharp scissors. You don't want to use your really small, tiny scissors. You want to use a little bit bigger pair of scissors, and ones with long blades that allows you to make a cleaner cut on the deer hair. So, yes, Tim, skating is better with a longer rod, say 10 foot. Yep, absolutely. And I just tie these on a size 14. I don't go any smaller, and I don't go any bigger. I consider this kind of a prospecting fly. I don't consider it as if caddis are hatching, I generally wouldn't put this fly on. I'd put something a little different, like an X caddis or CDC caddis or something like that. Fish are actually on caddis, but it does work for just a good prospecting fly when you just want to throw a dry fly out there and see if the fish will come up. Roger, so when I grease a leader, Roger, I use the same stuff on the fly as floating. I just take a little fly floating and the paste floating and rub it on my leader. Kind of a negative review, says William. Why are you demonstrating it today? Well, William, because it is a good fly. It's very popular with a lot of other people. Don't be biased by my opinion. And I do use the fly, but it's an extremely popular and effective fly. And it uses a couple deer hair techniques, which I know people are interested in. So now I was going to show you my favorite patterns here. I'm going to show you ones that I think that will teach you something. Okay, so I love tying this fly, says Craig. Use it as a training ground for bigger, more complicated bass bugs. Yep, it is good training ground for that. All right. Any other questions before we start? And Ken, I think I finished my. I did mention I just tied on 14. Yeah. Okay. All right. So and here's Jason that says, love to fish a Goddard, hate to tie it. Looking forward to seeing your demo. So, William, there are some people who want to see the Goddard Caddis. How do you get the fly dried after it gets waterlogged? You just rub it in some of that desiccant fly float, and it'll perk it back up pretty well. Or you put another one on, put that one away to dry. Tim, if you want to know who John Goddard was, I think you live in the UK. I would maybe get one of his books, because he wrote a couple of excellent books. He was good. I see Phil put a thing on Goddard there. Patrick just finished tying some bombers and buck bugs, and those are kind of similar except bigger and a little bit harder to tie. George says, I love tying the Goddard Caddis. Lots of time I use it in a hopper dropper rig. Yeah, it would be a good hopper dropper rig, and it's probably a good imitation of a small grasshopper. All right, so let's go tie this bug. What do you think? Should we go over and tie it? Here's what a sloppy one looks like close up. And there's kind of the profile of the Goddard Caddis. So the first thing that I am going to do is I'm going to take this fly out of there and put in a size 14 dry fly hook. And I do like a down eye on this fly instead of a ring eye. I often use the big eye. I often use the big eye dry fly hooks with a ring eye, but I'm using a standard size 14 dry fly hook here because of the antennae. It makes it a little bit easier with these antennae to use a down eye hook. So there's our hook and the vise. Make sure it's in focus. And Julia, you're gonna yell out with any questions, right? And I am using size 6/0 brown thread. You could use tan. Some people use GSP thread. I think it's too heavy for this fly, and you're not using monster amounts of deer hair here. So you can get away with your standard fly tying thread, 6/0 or 8/0. I like 8/0, but if you have trouble with deer hair, you might want to start with 6/0 or 140 denier. It's a little bit stronger. It's just gonna kind of bulk up when you get into tying the eye of the fly. So I'm going to start my thread in the middle of the hook. And trim it off, and then go back to the bend, right about where the barb starts to peak up, right where the bend. Don't need to go back as far as some other flies. So maybe just forward of the bend is where you want to start. And then we're going to get some deer hair. And this is the kind of hair that I like for this fly. It's fairly light in color, and it's got a nice round body to it, a nice round shape, which means it's going to flare well, and it's nice and clean. So, this is the kind of stuff you'd use for hoppers or muddlers.
Tom, we've got a couple questions when you're ready.
Yeah, sure. Fire away.
So Deborah's asking if you would ever tie this smaller than a 14.
I wouldn't, but you could. It's kind of a pain to tie in a 14. And if you want to tie into 16, you go right ahead. The trouble is you're kind of limited by the diameter of the deer hair, and you get down into a 16 or an 18, and it's really tough to deal with. So I just like it in 14, and it works in a 14. So use it for bigger caddis flies. Yes, go ahead.
Jason's asking, so speaking of size with this, how big might you go if you're using it as a terrestrial imitation?
Oh, you could go to a size 8 or a 10. Yeah. But if you're really using it as terrestrial, then you might want to go to something like a hopper instead, or a chubby Chernobyl. I mean, I like it because in a size 14, it does imitate caddisflies, but it also imitates terrestrials. So it's kind of a generic searching pattern that has a profile that the fish seem to like. But if you want strictly a terrestrial, then I wouldn't go all the trouble to tie this. I'd tie a foam hopper or something like that. Okay.
Okay. And then Alan asked, I have tied this with a mix of lighter deer and darker elk for a mottled effect. Have you ever tried that?
I haven't. No, I always tie it with the same color, but that's a good idea. And by the way, you can tie this with elk hair if you want, or you can tie it with even caribou. You can tie it with almost any kind of hair that you want. And no, that's not bleached elk. That is, that's deer hair, just natural white-tailed deer hair. So to start this, believe it or not, I'm going to put a drop of super glue on my thread right over the bend there. I'm just going to carefully come in. Oops, that's too big. Carefully come in and put a drop of super glue on there. This is going to keep that, this is going to help secure that deer hair. That's a big glop. I'm going to remove a little bit of it. There. And while that's sitting there, then I'll go and get my deer hair. And you want a fairly big hunk of deer hair to start. You want it probably wider for this size 14, a little wider than a pencil. So you want a pretty good hunk of it. You come in and cut that off. That's probably too much. But I'll get rid of some of that because I'm going to hold it by the tips and remove all the fuzzies there. Flick it around a little bit.
All right, a couple more questions, Tom.
Yeah.
Ralph's asking, do you want a wider gape hook? And relatedly, around that, Mark's asking, are you using a tactical hook?
No, I'm not using tactical hook. I'm using a standard size 14 dry fly, which I will then make barbless once I get it out of there.
And then
okay.
Rick's asking, last one for right now, are you going to tie in the underbody?
No, there is no underbody on this fly. It's all deer hair.
Great. That's it for now.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to take that. Bunch of deer hair, and I'm going to just trim the ends off. Trim the fine ends off. Just makes it easier to work with. So what I'm left with is just a hunk of deer hair, blunt at both ends. And I'm going to take the butt ends, or the heavier ends, and have them pointing off the back of the fly. So I'm going to come in. Trouble working around these cameras here. And I'm going to make that, probably twice the length of the shank, or maybe a little shorter. But I want that deer hair to extend out there. And I'm going to come in and just grab that bunch. And I'm going to make one loose turn. And then I'm going to make another a little bit tighter turn. And then I'm going to pinch, and I'm going to pull. And I don't want this to spin. I want this to stay on top of the hook. And then I'm going to take a couple more turns exactly in the same spot for now. So what you've got is that hair sticking out of the back of the hook and a little bit in front. Let me show you with the bigger camera so you can see how that looks. There. So that's how it looks at this point. So a mess, more or less. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly, as I'm holding onto this back part, I'm going to work forward through that hair, and I'm going to be pulling down nice and tight, and I'm going to slowly creep my way, wiggle the thread a little bit, creep my way through that deer hair until I get to the front of it. Then I'll just push it back a little bit and take a turn in front. So that's where we are now. Show you with the other camera. That's where we are now. And now I'm going to take another bunch of deer hair. And I'm going to cut another fairly large bunch. Move things a little bit here. And I'm going to get another bunch of the same hair, bigger, a little bit bigger than the diameter of a pencil. Cut that off. Clean it again. Turn it around and cut the tips off again. And then I'm going to come back to my spot, and I am going to find the middle of that bunch of hair, lay it, the middle point, right in front of that other bunch of deer hair, come around once, start to pull a little bit, come around twice in the same spot, a little bit more tension, and then come around a third time and let go and pull. And that's what you call spinning deer hair. Now, you want to take a few more turns in the same spot until that bunch stops moving. So it's not spinning anymore. So it's spun all the way around the hook. And I'll give you another view of it there. So that's where we are now. Just a fuzzy bunch of deer hair with some stuff sticking out the back. Now I'm going to go forward. I'm going to back the close-up up a little bit, so you can see this a little better. And now I'm going to wind through the deer hair moving forward. So I'm going to go a little bit forward, pull down tight, a little bit forward, pull down tight, a little bit forward, pull down tight, a little bit forward, pull down tight. You can see how that's all standing at right angles. One more, maybe one more, until you get almost out of hair. And you want to be, at this point, you want to be at about the midpoint of the hook. And then stroke it back. Take a couple turns in front. And there you are. Now, if you're a little bit too close to the eye, or you want this a little denser, you can grab the tail and grab the front and use your thumbnail to push that together a little bit, just to compress it a little bit. Oop. And my hook came out of the vise. Actually, my hook broke. Ha! My hook broke. I don't know what happened there. Bad hook. Bad hook. But luckily, I tied up a couple more. And I can hear you laughing, Roger Bird. I can hear you. I can hear you laughing. I don't like it, Roger. It's not very nice of you. Okay, so I've got my hook in the vise.
We do have one question once you're settled. Dennis is asking, what's the reason behind not spinning the first bunch of hair like you did for the second?
Because in your finished fly, you want a tail like this. You want a tail like that. And well, one of the reasons is it won't spin because the bend of the hook is in the way. But you don't want it to spin. You want it to just extend off the back of the hook. You want the part in front to spin, but you don't want the part behind the hook to the rear to spin. And it won't spin anyway. because the bend of the hook is in the way.
We have a couple comments. Someone said that's clearly not an Orvis hook. It's definitely not an Orvis hook that broke.
It is an Orvis hook. It's probably an old one, but that it doesn't happen very often.
And then Roger Bird said, I don't think a half hitch would fix this.
No, there's no way to fix that. You know, I mean, you break your thread, you can fix it, but there is no way you're gonna fix that.
And Phil just said Tom is super strong, y'all.
No, I don't know. I don't know what happened there. You get a bad hook. You get a bad hook every once in a while.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So now, if I were tying these for myself, and I actually did it with this one to demonstrate something, I would whip finish right now, just a couple of turns of whip finish, which I've already done here, and I would take it down into the kitchen, and I would turn on a tea kettle, and I would wait till I get some steam, and then hold my hook over the steam with a pair of forceps. And what that's going to do is it's going to make all this hair stand up nice and straight around the hook. It makes it, it fluffs it up, and it makes it a lot easier to trim it. So, I wasn't going to do that here, but I did steam this one. I went downstairs. I tied a couple so that I could show you what they look like after they're steamed. So actually, let me get that other one. I threw it out in the trash here. I can't find it now. Anyway, it didn't look that. Oh, did it? No. It didn't look that neat. The hair was not all sticking out at almost at right angles to the hook. So if you're doing these later, what a lot of people do is they will tie half a dozen of the bodies and then whip finish them, and then they'll take them and steam them all and then come back and finish them off. So at this point, you're ready to trim. And the first thing that you want to do is to trim the underbody. And I think it's probably easiest to show you this out of the vise. So let's go over here. This is a little tricky with all these cameras. So here's my bug. And what I'm going to do is look for the bottom. So I'm going to look for the eye of the hook, and I'm going to hold it like so. And I'm going to take a single edge or double edge razor blade. I'll hold it by the bend of the hook. Or no, actually, I'm not going to hold it by the bend of the hook. I'm going to hold it by this hair that's out here. And then I'm going to shave the underside of the fly very close, all the way down, all the way to the hook. And you probably need to do it. You don't want to go right in and shave it too close. You probably want to do this in steps so that you don't cut too much, because you got to be careful that you don't cut into your thread. So that's shaved underneath pretty well. I think I'll put it back in the vise now. I can do a lot of the rest of it in the vise. So now I'm going to shave the top. And I'm going to shave that at an angle. Hard to get in here. I'm going to shave this at an angle, starting at the front and working toward the back at an upward angle. And then I'm going to do this.
Roger's asking, would plunger-style hackle pliers be a better way to hold this while you're shaving it?
Probably.
Okay.
But I don't have any. Actually, I do have a pair of hackle pliers. Let me try it, Roger. I'm going to try that. Plunger style or otherwise, any kind of hackle pliers. All right, let's see. Let's see how this works. So now I'm looking at the top of the fly. And again, I'm going to cut at that angle. What you're trying to do is get a cone shape here. Now do the sides. And don't worry too much at this point. But you can spend a lot of time trimming these suckers. And if you're, a perfectionist, you can be going at it forever. I trimmed top and bottom. Now I'm trimming the sides, trying to even it up. And you're going to keep going until you get and then kind of round the edges until you get a kind of a cone shape. I think this razor blade was used before. You really want a new one. Yeah, I think I like it better. I think I like it better in the vise at this point. Sorry, Roger. Didn't work for me.
All right, we've got some razor questions here.
Okay.
Rick's asking, how did you break that razor in half?
I cut it with wire cutters.
Okay. And Drew is asking if there is a benefit to using a razor over scissors.
You get a cleaner cut, but scissors work fine too.
Mm-hmm. And we did have a question about what hackle pliers you just used, but and all camera and lens, but we can address that later.
Yeah, camera and lens. Sony with a macro lens. And you're going to keep going on this. I don't really like the way that's shaped. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my scissors out. See if I can get it better with the scissors. Yeah. The scissors are working better here. All right, that's enough for that part of it. And now we're going to trim the back end. And what you want to do here is grab the fly like so in your fingers so that your fingertips extend back beyond, and cut this at an angle. You can even round it a little bit. around the end maybe a little bit. So now, really hard to do this in front of the camera. A lot easier when you can get in closer. Anyway, so it should be, I'm going to take a little bit more off the top there.
All right, we've got a few more questions, Tom.
Okay.
Scott's asking why you couldn't use a single blade.
They're not as sharp as double edge.
Mm-hmm.
Now I cut too much off.
Trying to multi.
I cut too much off. So I'm gonna finish this off, but it looks terrible. No, it's got a caddis shape anyways.
All right, Tom, we got 2 more questions.
Okay.
Chris is asking, how is spinning deer hair different from what you're using?
The second bunch that I put in was spinning deer hair.
Okay.
It's exactly what I was doing, was spinning deer
hair. And then David's asking, is there a certain type of deer hair that you shouldn't buy for this type of fly that would really mess it up if you tried tying with it?
Bass bug hair wouldn't work very well.
Okay.
So I ran into trouble here just because I can't get close enough. I just, if you're doing this at home, you're going to have a lot easier time of it because you're going to be able to get in closer. And that's this has got that caddis shape. It's just not great, but it's fine. It'll fish well. So now you're going to reattach your thread. And by the way, when I said the double-edged razor isn't sharp enough, so you're going to reattach your thread up here. And you're only going to get about 2 flies out of each side of even a double-edged razor blade. It's really, you really need it super, super sharp. All right, so now we're going to prepare our antennae. And that's pretty easy. You're going to take a couple of feathers from the top of a hackle cape or some brown saddle that you don't like. You want to use feathers for which you have no other use. So these are way at the top of the cape. They're too big and webby for anything else. You're going to take 2 of those. If you just have saddle hackles, that's fine. Just find a couple saddle hackles that aren't any good where the fibers are bunged up or something, because you're just going to strip these and use the stems for the antennae. So I got a couple feathers here. I actually got 3. Anybody want one? And you're just going to come up to the tip and stroke those fibers down and then just strip them from the stem, both sides. Inch or so that you've got a clean, bare stem. And I'll do the other one. Whose idea was it to do a Goddard Caddis today? Huh? Whose idea was it? Julia, was this your idea?
Not mine. I'm just here to support.
No, I'm the guilty one. I thought I would do a challenging fly. So now I've got 2 hackle stems. I'm going to cut the tips off. And these are going to be my antennae. And I'm just going to lay those in on top of the hook so that they're pretty long. I mean, the antennae in a caddisfly are pretty long, about that long, about 1.5 the length, the shank of the hook. Make them longer or shorter. And then I'm just going to bind those to the top of the hook shank. And I'm going to try to keep them on top, but I'm not going to worry too much at this point. And I don't want to go all the way. Let me just get in here a little tighter. I don't want to go all the way to the eye. I want to leave a little room to whip finish underneath those antennae. So because I'm going to whip finish underneath here, and then that'll raise them up when you're done. And we're just gonna leave them there and come back, trim the ends of those hackle stems, and we're going to tie in a brown hackle. So I'm going to pick a size 14 hackle, and I don't like this hackle too long. Probably somewhere in here is going to be right. So what I do is, you can use a hackle gauge if you want. I just take them from the cape and flare them around the hook to see. And that's about right. I know this cape, so I was able to grab the right one first thing. I'm going to pluck that from the cape. You could use saddle hackle here too. If you don't have the right length hackle, you could trim it too. Trimmed hackle sometimes works really well on this thing. Now I'm just going to find the webby part at the bottom of the feather and strip the fibers away, just like I did for those antennae. Cut that. Actually, I'm not going to cut it. I'm not going to cut it, and there's a reason. I'm going to leave the fuzzy stuff on the end there. And there's a reason, which you could probably figure out. So I don't get it mixed up with those two hackle stems that I want. So I'm going to tie that in, leaving myself a little bit of a bare stem so I can get started. And then just wind forward, nice and tight. And because I left this thing on here, now I can pull that up and trim it. And I don't trim the wrong one. And all that's left now is to wind the hackle. And I'll take my hackle pliers. Let's see, should I do it with a wider one here? Yeah, probably be easier for you to see with the wider camera. And this is really tough getting in amongst these cameras. And I'm going to grab the tip of that hackle. And since I had a bare stem, I can get that started nicely. And I'm just going to wind slowly forward, slowly advancing my way forward with the hackle. Don't let up tension like I did there. Keep tension on that hackle. And they don't always go the way you want them to. Shiny side back. Fireflies are, I think, better with the shiny side facing back, dull side facing forward. Now let's go to the close-up. And I got my hackle all the way to the end. I'm going to come over a couple times with my thread. trim, carefully trim. Use those antennae as a guide on the outside of your scissors. Carefully come in and snip the end of that. And then you can, I would sweep the hackle back a little bit and take just a couple more turns for security to make sure that you got that hackle bound under. And then you can raise up these antennae, come in here, and whip finish. And bend them out of the way while you whip finish. What I like to do is get my whip finish started and then come in and pull those out of the way. Whoop. And if you got any hackle fibers stuck over the eye, you can trim them now. And then cut your thread. And then get your antennae the way you want them. Separate them a little bit so that they look natural. I mean, real caddisflies don't have perfectly balanced antennae, but get them where you want them. And then put a drop of head cement on top of there, and then that'll hold those guys in place. So there is a very lousy looking Goddard Caddis. Let me show you one that I tied before that looks better. It's tied the way they should look. I'm sure yours will look better than mine. All right, so there is what a Goddard Caddis should look like. Okay, so it's got that flare at the end, kind of a tube-shaped body, and flat on the bottom. That was what we were shooting for until I trimmed too much deer hair off of there. So that's what it's supposed to look like. If you do it right. More questions?
Got a bunch of questions.
Okay.
Let me go back a little bit. All right. Someone's just suggesting a little black stonefly dry demo eventually, which is not relevant to this, but okay.
Why would you use head cement versus glue? Well, versus UV glue. Problem with UV glue is if you want the head cement to soak into the deer hair a little bit when you put it on there. And UV glue, if it gets hidden from the UV light, it won't cure. So I use UV glue in places where everything is wide open, where I want a glossy head or the back of a wing case of a nymph or something like that. But any place you want the cement to seep in someplace and strengthen things, it's not as good. So you can use it if you want, but I think you're taking a risk that your head cement or your glue is not gonna lock things up the way you want them to. Other questions? I don't see any other questions, Julia.
Let's see. Going back up here. Folks are still asking about Hackle's.
Keith likes the wing to be triangle shaped. Yeah. Well, mine is kind of a triangle, Keith. Maybe not enough for you, but it's sort of a triangle. Those are Cotarelli hackle pliers. I got a pair because they looked interesting. They're made in Italy, and they seem to be good.
So this is an interesting question. Ed's asking, the original by Goddard and Henry had a green underdog. Why don't we see this version anymore?
I don't know. Good question.
Mm-hmm.
Things change. Things change, and patterns drift. And I didn't know their original had a green underbody, but yeah, it would be tough to spin the deer hair over a green underbody. Maybe they didn't want the deer hair flared all the way around.
Deborah was asking if there is such a thing as too much hackle on this fly.
Is there such thing as too much hackle?
Yes.
No, I don't think so. I mean,
fly, yeah.
You know, it's a fast water fly. It's a fly that's supposed to float really well. Mine is, you know, fairly sparse. You don't need a lot of hackle because you got a deer hair body, but yeah, I don't think there's so much thing as too much hackle on this now. Nope. Do you fish this with the antennae, or do you snip them off? No, William, I don't snip the antennae off. I went through all that trouble to tie them in. I'm not going to snip them off. They get in the way. They get in the way of tying it to your tippet, and I'm not so sure how important they are, because you already got a piece of tippet sticking out of the end of your fly, which probably looks like an antenna. Why are capes and hackles so expensive, Deborah? Because you have to grow a chicken to 9 months, and there's a lot of genetics involved. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of birds that don't make the cut. They have to be graded, and chicken feed is expensive. They're not just raised for food, where you're raising, I don't know, what are they raising for, 6-8 weeks for the table? These birds are 9 months old. There's a lot of chicken feed and a lot of care that goes into these. So that's why they're so expensive. These hackle capes are raised just for tying flies. You would never want to eat one of these chickens because they'd be scrawny as all get out. All their energy goes into feathers.
Mark's asking if there's an advantage to using this fly over a regular elk hair caddis.
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just another caddis pattern.
Okay.
Yeah, this one's a little bulkier. It might show up a little better in fast water, you know, if the fish are having trouble seeing the fly. But no, it's just a different take on the same bug. And, you know, as most things in fly fishing, I see I'm frozen there. Is my voice frozen too, or just my camera?
No, just your video froze.
Your voice. That's a flattering shot, huh? Let me switch cameras.
Oh, there you go. You're
back. No, you know, like all other things, you try an elk hair. If that doesn't work, you try a Goddard. If that doesn't work, you try a X caddis or something. It's just another variation of a caddis fly, and may work better some days than others. So.
Jake's asking, where have you seen the most success with this fly? Like, I'm guessing what kinds of waters or geographic locations?
Where there's hatchery fish. Because it looks like a pellet. Yeah, I've seen it work really well in very fast water, where the fish are grabbing quickly, and it presents a very wide profile, and it floats really well. So I think that's part of it. But yeah, Rick Woolham. Oh, Rick Woolham says Goddard had a tag thread that he spun dubbing onto, and then pulled forward underneath after clipping the body to shape. Got it. Thank you, Rick. Rick is an old friend and a superb fly tyer. So leave it to Rick to present us with that fact. Thank you very much, Rick. Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Why does that camera do that? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And it's not my internet connection. I'm hardwired to fiber optic, so it must be the network that we're going into, not my internet connection. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Thanks for suffering through this with me. I'm sorry that I couldn't tie you a better example, but I at least could show you one that I tied earlier that looked a little better. So I hope you learned something here. I hope you learned some new techniques, and I hope that maybe you are not so afraid of deer hair anymore, because, you know, once you get used to it, it's not that hard. It's all in the trimming. And if you're careful and slow with your trimming, you're going to come up with a beautiful fly. So thank you so much. And we will see you again next Monday. And next Monday, we're tying Enrico Puglisi's peanut butter. We're going to tie saltwater fly, and I'm going to try to get Enrico to come in with us and give me some advice on tying his pattern. So we'll see. But thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and
stay warm, Midwesterners.
Yeah, stay warm.
Frigid.
Stay warm. Yeah. All righty. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. See you on Monday.